there is something that I would like to take off of my chest. I am Italian, but this is a fever that is more or less spread everywhere. They also call it the American dream. And it is a pattern that we received from the old generation and that still perpetuates today. This is my friend Pietro. When it comes to money or to fashion, he is kind of a grandpa. He is an old school defender of the Italian sovereign bonds. But there is another thing that he defends so much.
You should buy a home, it's your best investment.
The idea that you have to own a house. In Italy, there is a stigma that you're basically an adult only when you own a house and you have a mortgage for that. And that is gonna be the heritage that you're gonna leave to your kids and da-di-da-da. This through generation created a lot of people that on paper are millionaires due to their real estate wealth. But this does not always translate into actual wealth because these homes are not always located in very attractive cities. And now they are stuck with assets that are hardly liquid, have low rents and a lot of taxes and cost attached. So my point is, does anyone question this idea, this stigma? Do you really have to buy a home to be happy, or can you rent? And does this even make financial sense in the long run? I'll try to discuss this running some numbers and giving you my personal opinion. Hi guys, I'm Giuseppe and I'm a finance graduate and money nerd. And today I would like to question the infamous stigma of owning a home and why it is not always the right thing to do. Certainly it's not the right thing for me, at least. I will discuss the reasons that can range from strictly financial, but also personal and career related. But obviously in owning a home there are many factors that comes to play, also the emotional ones. It's a very complex argument and there is definitely not a one-size-fits-all answer. But I just wanna say that if you do not want to buy a home, it's fine, you're not alone. And I'll show you why this is fine for me, at least. Let's start by considering my current situation. I'm 30, I'm not married, I do not have kids, and I'm a young professional. Right? Like, am I still young at 30? Right? I'm not a financial advisor and this is not financial advice. So let's get started. Financially speaking. So the argument of owning a home should be always analyzed on the financial side first, because it's probably gonna be one of the most important, if not the most important, financial decision of your life. When it comes to renting a home, we have just one cost, that is the rent. In the rent, all the costs that are faced by the landlord are baked in. There might be some adjustment related to ordinary maintenance, that is sometimes due to the renter, but that's it. You're not paying the mortgage, you're not paying taxes, and you're not paying extraordinary maintenance works. And most money that you can tie to a rent is probably 3 months of rent. So the cost of renting is highly predictable and upfront very low. On the other hand, when you buy a house, you have to face all these costs. Property taxes that varies a lot throughout Europe. For our conversation, we can assume that the property taxes are something like 1% per year. Maintenance costs that also significantly increased due to inflation. Many sources suggest to put out something like 1 to 2% depending on how old your house is. Let's say 1.5% for the sake of this conversation. So for a house of €500,000, we're talking about 5,000 per year in taxes and 7,500 per year in maintenance costs. And finally, the most complex part, you have to consider the cost of capital.
Let's assume that we put on a down payment of 20% and that we finance the remaining 80%.
Now, when it comes to the cost of capital, we have to consider both the cost of equity and the cost of debt. When it comes to the cost of debt, is quite straightforward, since it's just the interest rate that the bank proposes. Currently, interest rates are quite high. And for example, my bank proposes something like 6% for a 30 years mortgage. When it comes instead to the cost of equity, it is a little bit more complicated. We have to consider what is called an opportunity cost. That is basically what we are missing out by tying those money to a real estate investment instead of anything else. Now, real estate more or less grew at 2% over the inflation rate. And this can vary depending on a lot of factors, such as your city, your country, or even your neighbor. For example, in Europe, there are many ex-Soviet countries that are experiencing a lot of growth in terms of real estate prices. But obviously this cannot be considered perpetual. So you have to consider the trends, macroeconomic and microeconomic, of the area you're gonna live in. As we said though, for the sake of the conversation, let's assume that the real estate growth over inflation is 2%. Now we have to compare this 2% to what we could have had in any other investment. And this can be much different based on the person you are. For example, you can invest in the stock market that is gonna yield something like 7% after inflation, or you can be an entrepreneur and maybe your business is gonna expect to yield something like 15% year over year. Or you can be a young professional and maybe doing an MBA can be a better investment for you. We have to put a number here, so let's say 7% for the sake of the conversation. That is the most simple case, so the case in which you invest in the stock market. So in this case, the equity opportunity cost is gonna be given by 7% minus 2%. So the potential return of the stock market minus the return of the real estate. So we have our final formula for the cost of capital. That is 6% multiplied by 0.8 plus 5% multiplied by 0.2. A total of 5.8%, at which we also have to add 2.5% from taxes and maintenance, with a final number of 8.3%. So in this case, you take the value of your house, you multiply it by 8.3%, that gives you 41.5 thousand euro per year, and if your yearly rent for a comparable house is gonna be less than that, you're better off renting. At least financially speaking. Now sure, these numbers can be influenced by a lot of different factors. But also, if you're young, not married, you do not have kids, you can still rent a shared space with flatmates and save a lot on your rent, instead of buying a house if you do not need to. I mean, the advantage is that you can rent a single room, but you can hardly buy it. And this is an advantage that you should take until you can, especially in areas with high cost of living, so you can build a strong cushion of money. Career flexibility. Another strong argument for not buying a home is career flexibility and opportunities. So I am Italian and I'm European, and I can easily move in any state of the European Union if there is any work opportunities that I would like to follow. And this can potentially grow my income by a lot, especially when working for international blue chips companies. If I had owned a house here in Milan, I would probably be limited to the local job market, and I'm not a great fan of this city anyway. Instead, by not buying a home, I'm free to move wherever opportunities arise. Also, there is an intrinsic correlation between commuting and happiness. So even if I happen to change job and still be in Milan, I can decide to change my rent and rent something closer to my office instead of having to accept a longer commute. And this leads me to my last point, that is time. Finally, I like working, but when it comes to paperwork, I'm very lazy. I do not want to have issues related to property managers, notary, agency and whatever, fixing works and stuff like that. I really prefer spending my time and my energies into working, relaxing and learning new stuff. The idea of buying a house means also that you have to hunt for the right deal, in the right place, with the right conditions, and that can easily burn 1 year of all your spare time. Then requesting a mortgage is another hassle, visiting the notary, the agency and so on. At the end of the day, it's still a lot of stuff that I can simply solve by renting. So guys, as always, thank you for watching. These are my personal and financial reasons for not buying a home, at least now. And obviously things can change and who knows what can happen in the future. Market conditions may change, I might need more space, or I simply may decide to settle down somewhere. So I hope you liked the video, and if so, please leave a like and subscribe. And if you're looking to make a down payment, you might also be interested in understanding better my saving structure, and you can find it here. Bye!